Hi folks, welcome back to our second video on the components of the compensation mix. Our second component here we're going to talk about is performance pay. And again, as you can see from the definition, it's any kind of a financial reward that you're going to get for achieving a certain level of performance. So again, you can look at doling out performance pay increases based on how an individual, a team, or even the entire organization performs. So let's begin with a more in-depth look at performance pay. As I said, you can have three different types: individual, group, and organizational performance pay plans. Some organizations have individual performance pay plans, which could be piece rates. So say, for example, you're a company and you're in the textiles business and you make uniforms for the RCMP, police services, whatever. Sometimes those people, they make certain elements. Different people are specialists. So somebody might make buttonholes, and some people might sew on buttons, and some people might make pockets. So sometimes they give them incentives for how many pockets they sew on and how many buttons they sew on and that kind of thing. And of course, we look at the quality of that work as well. So those might be examples of piece rates. Again, you can get commission based on how much you sell. Merit pay, which again, we talked about when we had our intermediate accountant in the first video making $50,000 a year. If that individual got a 5% pay increase, that's $2,500. That's a merit pay. And there may also be certain targeted incentives that might be geared to specific groups, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later chapter. We can also give incentives based on the team and how the team performed. So was the team able to, manage or reduce costs by, 5%? Did the team whatever goal they achieved? We're going to look at in terms of maybe giving them an incentive based on if they've reduced costs, maybe if they've increased productivity. So maybe they've contributed to helping us operate not just more efficiently, but by decreasing costs. Maybe they've also found ways to help us increase revenues. Right? Maybe we've had goal sharing plans. So goal sharing plans we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about performance pay plans in a later chapter. But there can be a wide variety of team-based incentives that they can get. Remember, LSE galvanizing kind of worked under this. So you can kind of see that group performance pay plans might be more appropriate for organizations where they have high involvement, or they're trying to create a high involvement environment. Organizational pay plans, again, look at allowing employees at all levels of the organization to share in organizational success. So that could be through a stock purchase program. So if the company trades on the exchange, they trade publicly, and employees have an opportunity to buy shares through the company, they can save themselves the brokerage fees, buy them through their payroll deduction. And then again, of course, they might, reap the benefits of the stock going up, and that's money they've earned, right? Profit sharing. So if companies have achieved their stated goals and it's increased their revenues by X% or increased productivity by X%, any of those profits that are in the company as a result of achieving their overarching corporate goals may be shared in part with the employees. So there's your profit sharing plans, and there are a multitude of other plans, many of which we'll discuss later on in our course. So if we want to look at the advantages and disadvantages of performance pay, well, again, clearly an advantage is it's going to signal key behaviors because people will know what they're bonused on and look exactly at achieving those behaviors, right? It can reduce the need for other types of practices in companies to control behavior. So a lot of times, if we have performance pay in place for employees, a lot of times what that means is that companies might say, well, we want to give our employees a little more autonomy, a little more freedom to act, and not have the managers, scrutinizing absolutely every move they make. As long as they work within certain parameters, they have some choices and options within which they can choose to get the job done. So again, it's going to reduce the controlling behavior. So again, pulling away more from the human relations and the classical managerial strategy to more of a high involvement. It makes it very clear what the standards of performance are. It supports, again, I would say, the specific managerial strategies, the high involvement, and it does make pay more variable. which is an advantage to a company in the sense that it could actually reduce the pay you give out, which may not necessarily be a good thing because it means people aren't achieving their goals. So does that mean the goals were set too high? The employees don't have the capabilities or maybe the resources to achieve the goal that they need. There could be all kinds of reasons. So it might be an advantage, but it might also be a disadvantage. Some of the disadvantages of performance pay is that some employees might prefer the predictability of a steady stream paycheck. So again, we look at this and say, well, if I have an administrative assistant, I don't know that I'm going to put them on performance pay. What customers are they meeting? How are they going to be able to influence increases in revenue or significantly decrease costs? Maybe not a lot. So you may find that a job evaluation or market pricing is very good for these employees, but maybe for a salesperson, and the admin assistant might want that predictability because they don't really have goals and objectives that might tie back and be as meaningful for some types of performance pay. But where you've got salespeople, this might not be an issue. All right. But where you have employees that prefer some level of predictability and pay, a performance pay system could be a disadvantage. You remember when we talked about base pay earlier in the first video of this chapter, we said that there are some organizations there that might give employees a choice. Might say, well, you can take, 100%, incentive or commission, or we might put you on a 20% base pay, or say $20,000 a year, and the rest is you earn on commission. So it might get around that level of unpredictability and some of those disadvantages around that, but maybe not. But companies have to think about what they're going to offer employees if they see that this could be a key disadvantage. It could require higher compensation, especially if you've got high achievers. It may only focus on rewarded behaviors. So say, for example, you said to a salesperson, you got to increase your sales of the existing products by 25%, and we want you to increase sales of brand new products by 50%. Well, guess what? They may focus based on where they know they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck on the behaviors they know they stand the biggest chance of getting compensated for at the sake of some others. So again, they may only focus on rewarded behaviors to the extent it's going to maximize their bonus. So some things might fall off their radar, which the company wants done. It might also cause unanticipated consequences. So say, for example, this is just a funny story that I happen to know about. Green Giant is a company that many of you heard of. You probably bought some of their products. And it was interesting because at one point in time, workers on the line were incentivated or got performance pay based on how many insects they actually removed from the harvest that came through for processing. Now, you might think that's a little gross, but that happens. So they got bonus for that. So what some people did is they went in their backyards, got bugs, brought them to work and said, hey, look at the number of bugs I removed from stuff on the line. So again, sometimes when you're giving incentives for achieving certain behaviors, you might have some unanticipated consequences, people trying to pad their bonuses. So you have to make sure that you set up the performance pay system so that it gets around those unethical or unsavory kinds of things that some employees might engage in order to increase their performance pay. And it could be more complex than base pay, especially, with the banks now. They have their performance pay systems quite metricized or based on numeric achievement. So it will take a little bit more to achieve them and to really think about what you want it to look like based on what you can afford to pay. Now, the last item I want to look here is indirect pay. That's the third component of the compensation mix. And as we said, it's not part of your base or performance pay, but it looks largely at benefits and pensions. Now, normally, we said in an earlier slide that 15% of total compensation in medium to large private sector firms have indirect pay, but it could be anywhere from 17 down to 10% depending on the industry. And again, some research has shown us that on average, benefits were almost 20% of total compensation. That's among larger employers. So you could have things like the banks, any large company might be prepared to pay up to and even in excess of that much. So again, the company has to determine within that 40 to 70% of that operating budget, how much of that is going to be, dedicated to indirect or benefits. And we also find too that the trend is for many companies to decrease healthcare benefits for employees and to make employer pension plans a lot more lean as well, in terms of not paying out as large a benefit to people. So again, you always have to be conscious of, as an employer, how much you can afford to pay, especially when you're thinking down the road and you're wanting to be competitive internationally. So sometimes if employers might say, I don't want it to constitute as much of my compensation budget as it used to, then I got to cut back benefits. Or if employees want those benefits, they're going to have to pay the premiums. Similarly with pension plans. Teacher pension plans are quite rich, but there's a big cost that teachers pay toward their plan that many of us would say, holy, I don't think I could afford to pay that much money toward my plan. So, you have to kind of look at this and say, if there are things employees want, they may have to be picking up more of the bill if they want to maintain that certain level of health care coverage and pension security. Now, some of the major categories, we've already talked about this earlier, but the mandatory plans, which are CPP, EI, and workers' comp, deferred income plans, which could be pension plans, your health care benefits, including long-term disability, vacation plans, sabbaticals. Employee services might range from EAP counseling, employee assistance counseling, to food services. So again, sometimes they have cafeterias. There's some companies that have cafeterias within the company, and they offer healthy menu choices, that kind of thing to promote good health amongst employees. And then miscellaneous benefits, which could mean purchase discounts on products that you buy. So for example, let's say you work at in a mall. In a shopping mall, there are some stores that might allow you, because you're employed in one of the mall stores, they might allow you discounts when you go shopping. You might have a card that says you are employed by this particular company, which is also in the mall. So there's all kinds of little things that might be there as well that could be considered indirect pay. Some of the advantages, it's certainly an attraction. People now are looking more for the indirect benefits or indirect pay, including healthcare benefits, than ever before. So it's certainly an attraction. It also is a way to match up with what some unionized firms are giving their employees. Normally, unionized firms will negotiate this in their contracts, and many times what they do is, if the union workers get it, they give it to the salaried workers. Sometimes some of these healthcare benefits might have favorable tax treatment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about indirect benefits pay and indirect benefits, indirect pay specifically being your healthcare benefits. Economies of scale in purchasing. So again, some companies have noticed, well, if we have a large number of employees that are going to take these particular coverages, just through economies of scale, because I've got the volume, I might be able to purchase it at a price which is favorable to employees and us as an employer. It can provide valued rewards for no cash, meaning that the employees may have to pay little or even no cash. So if you have a deductible, it might be very small. If you have a copay, it might also be very small or even nothing. But, you still get the peace of mind of having that benefit. It can help promote company products. So again, if you know that these are organizations that treat their people well, right? You might be more inclined to see that company succeed, so you might support them more in terms of buying their products or services. And certainly it could support a managerial strategy. Now, I would submit that anytime you have any kind of indirect pay, it certainly would support any managerial strategy, classical, human relations, and high involvement. But people that are managed by classical managerial strategies and even human relations strategies, again, the indirect pay is seen more as a hygiene factor, meaning that we expect it when we've got it, but if you lessen the benefit, we're going to lose motivation and become a little more disenchanted with the company. So it's more of a hygiene factor if you look at classical and human relations. But again, even high involvement companies would want some significant level of indirect pay. Some of the disadvantages, again, the cost can be very high. It's difficult to develop efficient benefit packages. So say, for example, here, we're going to talk about it a little bit more in a later chapter, but say, for example, you are in your late 40s, early 50s, you don't have any kids at home anymore, and you say, well, I don't want orthodontics coverage, I don't have kids, I don't have braces myself, I don't need it. But somebody who has young family may need orthodontics coverage for their kids. Well, it's hard to buy it efficiently if the makeup of your organization is mostly in the late 40s and early 50s population, and you have fewer people at that younger age that have younger children. So again, you really have to balance the demographics with the benefits that you're going to provide, and look at, if you want to provide some benefits to employees that the masses may not want, how much is it going to cost you as an employer to offer it? And maybe that's where employees have to pay more of the cost if they want it. It doesn't motivate task behavior. So in other words, it won't make you more committed to doing the job if you offer it. It may cause excessive employee stability. So again, remember those people we talked about before in a previous video for chapter 3, the ones that quit and stay? If the benefits are really good and they know they're not as good anywhere else, they may be more committed to stay with your organization. And again, it can, as we said before, constitute undesirable behavior. Again, that quit and stay mentality. If we look at now a little bit more at base pay, I want to focus here, and I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the methods for base pay. We will talk about the methods for performance pay and indirect pay in later chapters, but this chapter is going to focus for the balance on looking at these three elements. Okay, market pricing, job evaluation, and pay for knowledge systems. Okay, market pricing and job evaluation we've already talked about. The market pricing, again, is looking at external equity for which you pay. Job evaluation is looking at maintaining internal equity amongst your existing employees, and pay for knowledge is paying you for the skills and the competencies that you know that you have, right? And this again is something here, this last one is something more associated with high involvement companies. You remember LSE galvanizing we talked about much earlier on? This would be something that they're doing, right? Now, if we look at market pricing, some of the advantages is it's easy, right? Simplicity and the cost. So again, it may be costly if we look at market pricing, but at least we know that we're competitive, right, with what other organizations are paying if we take the time to see what the market is paying for similar jobs. And it keeps your jobs aligned with market conditions. Some of the disadvantages is that the going rate, or what that market price is for that job, may not always be easy to identify. You may need consultants to help you there, which could increase the cost of making sure you're competitive externally. Job definition, so an electrical engineer, I'm paying $125,000, the community's paying $175,000. Is there something that maybe they're doing there to earn that $175,000 that I'm not expecting mine to do? And from a recruitment perspective and selection perspective, how am I going to communicate that to candidates? They might not even in the recruitment process want to apply if they think I'm paying less. So again, it might make it difficult to even recruit people. It doesn't address internal equity, but again, so it may create some internal disequity. But again, if it's a known condition, it may even be temporary, so then salaries will fall in line once that temporary blip is under control. It may mean that your compensation strategy goes a little bit out of whack because, again, if you have to pay more, you just have to identify those jobs that you have to pay more and just consider them as kind of the outliers, right? You can't help it. So you may lack a little bit of control there, but again, you need to do the due diligence to know what you have to pay people to keep them, because you don't want to go through all that recruitment selection process and then they leave you. Oh, and then by the way, training as well, and then they leave you, right? So it may violate pay equity legislation, but I don't agree with the wording here that the authors have chosen to use. It may not keep you in step with pay equity, but don't forget, under the legislation, there are what we call differences that are allowed under pay equity. So if you're paying a male-dominated job class more than a female-dominated job class, which scores equally under skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions, which are the four compensable factors under pay equity. If it's a market condition, it's considered a permissible difference to pay more. You just have to identify it as that when you post your plan. So again, it's just that the optics inside your organization may not look good, but it doesn't really violate pay equity legislation. It's more that it could be violating it if you don't identify it as a permissible difference. So hopefully this has served as a little bit of a review even for you guys on pay equity. If not, make a posting on your discussion board and we can chat about it later. Job evaluation, which is the other method of determining base pay, and this is more internal. Some of the advantages are it centralizes the control right in the HR department for compensation. It promotes internal equity, which is great for pay equity, right? We also have here the availability of package plans from consultants. So there's a lot of job evaluation plans that can be purchased, okay, from consultants and tailored to your organization. It fits well with classical and human relations strategies if that's what you're going for, right? And don't forget, we had cook foods, the chicken gutters, decapitate chickens. Again, that's classical, right? And again, job evaluation would be fine for them. Low discontinuation rate means that most companies, they have job evaluation systems and they keep them. They may refresh them every once in a while, but job evaluation is always seen as something that organizations, once they begin them, they keep them, especially if they're bound to do due diligence under pay equity legislation. They need to have a job evaluation system. Some of the disadvantages is that it may impede high involvement. So if you're paying somebody in line with a job evaluation plan and based on how they're performing and the level to which they're performing, they can't get pay increases that they think are worthy of what they're doing and how well they're performing, they may leave you. So high involvement organizations, they may use job evaluation as one of the components of their compensation mix, but it might not be one that's as highly used. Maybe performance pay is higher. It could be more costly to develop than market pricing. Some people may say, hey, I just want to be competitive in the market that I'm drawing my labor from. Well, again, don't forget, you also have to make sure that if you're bound by pay equity, that you have some kind of job evaluation system, and that can take money to develop. You need job descriptions to assess, so you have to assess the job description, okay, in order to know what the employee does and how many points the job is going to score, so that you can determine how much you're going to pay it internally vis-a-vis other jobs that score similar points. It can become adversarial, so other people might think their jobs are more important than other jobs. So how come my job on skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions, I'm a nurse. You know, I work in the sick bay department. They're part of human resources, and I'm only paid, this much, and I got an electrician being paid the same as I am. That electrician, a nurse? Come on now. People, might say, how do those jobs compare? Well, in the pay equity world, they may, based on the number of points they score. So some people might complain or resent the fact that they're being paid the same or less than other job classes that they consider beneath them. Could be costly to maintain, again, if you involve consultants in developing and managing your job evaluation system. And it can inhibit flexibility and skill development, because if people don't think they're going to get paid anymore if they learn more skill, guess what? They might not be as incentivized or motivated to learn it. Okay, now if we go on, we're going to look at pay for knowledge and skill. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to do that as a separate video, because they've also got the concept of skill-based pay, and I want to make sure that we explain a little bit more on how they're related. So I'm going to come back to this slide and the last few in our last video series for this chapter. So stay tuned.